Hello everybody and welcome back to AllTap. My name is Jan and today I'll be showing you how to animate our fog and volume presets. First thing I'd like to preface before starting the video is I strongly recommend you watch our showcase tutorial that we posted a couple weeks ago. Sat did a wonderful job there showcasing the whole add-on, showing you guys how to install it, explaining all of these modules and explaining all of the properties that lie inside them. So if you watch that, you'll have a very good grip on the add-on itself and this video will make a lot more sense. In this video, however, we're gonna dive into how to animate the fogs using drivers and keyframes. After that, I'll show you a couple nice tricks in the shader editor that you can use to kind of go beyond the presets that we provided. And the little tease I can share with you guys, I'm also developing a preset manager right now. So it's gonna allow you to save the custom presets that you guys are going to be able to create into the add-on itself and use them on all of your projects. That is not out yet, but it will be out soon, so make sure to stay tuned and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss it when it does come out. And then lastly, towards the end of the video, I'll show you a couple of viewport and render tricks that you can use to enhance the renders to make the fog look better and get a better result. Alright, let's head on over to our blend file. I've just gone and appended the ground fog 11 preset into the scene, which by default already comes animated, but we're going to remove the animation and I'll show you a couple ways you can do this yourself. The techniques I'll show you apply to all of the volume presets over here, and you can of course apply the same logic to the materials of the VDBs. As a first example, I'll show you how to animate the ground fog going along an axis to kind of simulate rolling fog or rolling mist. Most of the animations here are done within the mapping module down below, and if you just play around with the values, you'll see that if I move it along the X or the Y axis or the Z axis, the fog just moves. One way you can animate this is simply just by keyframing it. So you can right click any of the values in the add-on or in Blender in general. You can right click anything and add a keyframe. So we'll do that on the Y-axis over here. We'll say insert keyframe. We'll move about 100, let's just move towards the end on the 150th frame. We'll change the value, say it traveled 5 meters. And you can right click and click insert keyframe, or you can just hover and press I on your keyboard. That will then add the 2 keyframes, and when we hit play, our fog is rolling. As you can see, it's not a constant or not a linear keyframe animation. It kind of ramps up in the beginning and then ramps down towards the end. To fix that, you want to select the keyframes and change the interpolation mode for them. But as you can see, you don't see any keyframes down here in the timeline. That is because you need to actually click the node that has the keyframes for them to show up on the timeline. So if I click them over here, press A to select both of them, press T and click linear. Now the animation doesn't ramp up and ramp down, it just constantly goes from 0 to 5 meters. Now with this method, you can animate a lot of these values and get really specific looking results. Think of it as if you're trying to make the fog feel more interactive. You'll see what I mean when I later explain what drivers do. But since you're setting precise keyframes for precise values on precise timings, you can kind of manipulate the fog to conform to the objects in your scene. So for example, here I've just set some extra keyframes on the rotation, and that way I can get the fog rolling back and forth as well. And there's kind of no limit to what you can achieve with this. You can keyframe any value from seed, scale, noise, color, density, the whole mapping, any node that's not even exposed in the add-on itself. You can right click and insert keyframes. That's how you can animate most things in Blender by default. So this is just one of the approaches you can take. The approach we took with the presets that we provided is via drivers. Drivers are a pretty complex thing, and I really recommend watching CG Matters video on that topic. The link's going to be down below in the description. He does a really good job at explaining what drivers are and how they work and all the different more complex ways that you can use them. For this example today, and for all the presets that are also included here, we took a very basic approach to keep it simple and easy to use. So let's set up our first driver, but first I'll delete all the keyframes. I'll just click on the node, press A, press X, and delete keyframes. So now our fog is not animated anymore. I will go for the same style of animation, so I'll just get the fog to roll down an axis. I'll take the Y axis. And to create the driver, you click on the value you want to set the driver to, and you type hash, frame, asterisk, and then you do a bracket, and then you do a value. So with drivers, especially in shader drivers, you want to do small values, and you'll see why. For example, if I type 0.5 into this, the fog's gonna be really fast. So I'll click on the driver again, and I will change the value to 0.02. That's gonna make the fog have this slower rolling effect. And you can go really low with these values to make the fog really, really slow. And this will give it a very subtle movement, which in your scene can make a huge impact. Fog doesn't really roll that fast in real life. So keep these values low for best looking results. Here we have an example that's a preset called Magic Blob that already has this. It has a couple drivers. One is on the Z-axis and one is on the color hue. So as you can see, I'm taking the color ramp here. And if I click on the value, you'll see what's happening. So every frame, the hue value gets multiplied by 0.01, therefore increasing each frame. So if we hit play, we'll see the result of that. And you don't need to do this with a color ramp. You can do this with a color socket as well. So if I just unplug that, set a color value to it, you're gonna see it's gonna change hues as the animation plays out. You can do this with emission. But be careful though, values do have a cap. So stuff like the roughness and detail, these both have a cap. So for detail it's 15, roughness is 0 to 1. If you have it on 0 and you do a hash frame times value, you'll see that the value will increase, but once it does hit the cap, it can't keep multiplying, so it's not gonna get more and more rough. Just something to be wary of. So with that out of the way, how do we actually animate something that's not animated yet? And I also picked a preset that works a little different than some of the fogs in here. There's kind of two approaches we took for vector mapping this. I'll show you both. So for example, on this project, if I go into mapping and I try to make this preset just continuously flow from top to bottom, you'll see that it doesn't actually continuously flow. It just goes out of the cube. That's because it's actually focused on the center point. So here I'll scale it to like 3 so you can visually have a better representation of what happens there. And there's two ways to fix it or change it. You want to go into the shader editor itself and go to the texture coordinate and mapping node here. What you're looking for is the connection between the mapping node and the noise texture that's impacting the shader. And you can duplicate this mapping node or you can just take a fresh one and simply place it before the noise texture. And now you have your own location, rotation, and scale coordinates for what's inside of the already mapped coordinates. So if I take the Z value and I keep dropping it down, you're gonna see that it just keeps flowing and coming in. So if I click the value and input frame, and let's actually just increase that to 0.5, you'll see that we have an infinitely transforming volume. Now the reason this isn't just standard in all of the presets is some presets actually look better if you can manipulate the vector space in which they're in. For example, the fog planes, you can get some different looking results by positioning the cloud towards either edges or up, left, right. You can basically make different shapes depending on where inside the cube the actual volume is. Of course, combine it with stuff like scaling and you get even weirder and different looking results. So that is the reason for that. But you can of course still just put your own mapping node before them and animate the noise that is inside the volume there. So this preset is not animated by default, but I can keyframe the Z value or change the Z value and we have this kind of smoking ground effect coming from this. You can also roll it left to right, do all sorts of stuff, rotate the noise inside it, and then also have a separate rotation for the volume vector as well. Now this is a little more in depth and a little more advanced, but I'd still like to show you. It's kind of deconstructing how the add-on works, how the interface here works in combination with the shader nodes. There's a nice little trick you can do for now to expose certain values here. So over on this preset, if I change the Z value, as you can see, I'm actually moving the vector space inside the volume again. So I'm pushing everything up or everything down. And I can't really achieve this endless cube of just falling down, of this noisy fog just falling down. So if we apply the same trick like before, by putting a mapping node in before the texture node, I can get that result, but I have to use the node I just added into the shader editor to get that. But there's a way to get this node into the interface as well. If you're gonna look and inspect the shader tree, you're gonna see that there's certain nodes that we renamed to specific names, and these are the nodes that are used to display on the interface of the add-on. So if we take our mapping node here, press N to pop out this panel, and we copy the name, and also we need to rename this one. So let's rename this one to mapping temp, and we go into the other mapping node and we paste the previous name, which is just map. And now we go back into our interface. You're gonna see that I now changed that the interface displays this node. It's a little confusing because I didn't copy the label as well, so let's just fix that so it makes a bit more sense. So this was the old node that we were exposing before. We just pushed everything up or down, and this one actually pushes the noise up or down, or whatever direction we pick. A little trick we already mentioned in the showcase video: if you hold shift while dragging these values left and right, you get more precise scrubbing. So if I hold shift and slide, I can get really nice small values, whereas if I just don't hold shift and just drag, it's kind of hard to sometimes get a sense of what's even happening. And you can apply the same logic to any node that's in the tree. It's a little in-depth when you consider all the presets, and VDBs have their own custom named nodes. So we're considering making a video showcasing specifically this technique being used to kind of modify the presets and what is showing in the interface, so you don't have to use the shader editor alongside it. So if that's something you want to see, just leave it down in the comments below and we'll make a full in-depth video showing the whole naming scheme and how it works. So as you can see, if you use the add-on itself in combination with the shader editor, it becomes a whole different tool, and it's really powerful. And something that we want to do, and it's being actively developed on right now, is to save your own presets, to save your work into the add-on itself. Lastly, I'd like to show you a few tricks that improve the looks of volumes inside your viewport and also in the renders themselves. So first, if we go into our render settings, this value will by default be set to 0.1 alongside your max sample count. I like to decrease these both to 0. 0 means that it will be unlimited, as your viewport doesn't really suffer from continuously just rendering more and more samples. Basically, the longer you let the viewport be still, the more clear the volume is gonna be. And the noise threshold, I like to drop it all the way down as low as it goes. This just means that the noise will be as fine as it possibly can. I personally also like to take on the denoiser in the viewport as well. I use optics with only the albedo pass and the start sample on 1. So it starts denoising the moment it gets the chance to. As you can see, it's already denoising. If I turn the overlay on, you're gonna see up there the samples just keep going, and the longer I keep the computer running, the longer they go. Of course, don't forget to apply the same settings to your render settings. So lower the threshold, set the maximum samples here, and of course your denoiser of choice. So I think that would be it for this video. We covered the very basics of how to animate these fogs. Stuff like driver animation, stuff like keyframe animation is very simple at its core, but it has a very high skill ceiling. When animating with keyframes, you can then go into the graph editor, modify how the keyframes interpolate between each other and get even better looking result that way. Drivers don't have just frame functions. That's why I really recommend the CG Matter video. He gives you a better perspective of the stuff you can do. But from our side, that would be it, guys. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or video ideas that you would like to see done, make sure you leave them down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.